hitting parts of Aberdeenshire and then the east coast of England, especially Norfolk seeing the odd shower. But for most places, it's dry. For many, it'll be fine and sunny, but it ain't going to be warm, with temperatures in single figures. A chilly day and feeling particularly cold in the east with this brisk wind. That wind will only slowly ease during Saturday, but it should ease away, as will any showers just hitting the eastern side of England. And for most, Saturday is also set fair. Yes, there'll be a frosty start, but then plenty of autumn sunshine, lifting the temperatures to between 4 and 8 Celsius.
Who is it?
We're here for the show.
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
Affects us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquia, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And a very good evening. Welcome to Farage at 7 o'clock here on GB News. What a day, another big day for political news. Yes, we have had record immigration figures. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? We'll be discussing that, of course. And within that, I have got an exclusive about what I believe is a student visa shocker that you haven't heard from anyone else. That is to be looked forward to later. Now, of course, Nigel is in the jungle. You may well have been watching. More to come tonight. More revelations, it's fair to say. We'll obviously be talking to Ben Leo about that. And to finish the show, this is extraordinary. Is Labour losing the Muslim vote? Is Labour losing the Muslim vote? We'll be discussing that in detail later on. But first up, it's the news with Theo Chikomba.
I'm Theo Chikomba in the GB newsroom. Police have confirmed a 5-year-old girl is among the victims of a stabbing in Dublin. She was one of 5 people injured in the attack and is said to be in a serious condition. 2 other children and a woman are also being treated in hospital. Police say they are not treating the incident as terror-related. Irish Police Superintendent Liam Geraghty described the extent of some of the injuries.
5 casualties have been taken to hospitals in the Dublin region. These casualties include 3 young children, an adult female and an adult male. 1 girl aged 5 years has sustained serious injuries and is currently receiving emergency medical treatment in CHI Temple Street. 1 boy aged 5 years and a girl aged 6 years who received less serious injuries were brought to CHI Crumlin for treatment. The boy has since been discharged from CHI Crumlin.
13 hostages held by Hamas are due to be released from Gaza as a temporary ceasefire with the terror group is to begin tomorrow. A spokesperson from the Qatar Foreign Ministry said the first group of civilians will be released at 4 o'clock. Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary has met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on a visit to the country. Lord Cameron said he wanted to see for himself the communities affected by last month's Hamas attacks, and he hopes all those involved in the truce deal will make it happen. Officers are appealing for dashcam footage following a crash that killed 4 teenagers in North Wales. Jevon Hurst, Harvey Owen, Will Fitchett and Hugo Morris won a camping trip in North Wales. Their bodies were recovered on Tuesday after a car was found overturned and partially submerged in water. North Wales Police says it appears to have been a tragic accident. Police are asking anyone who has been travelling on the A4085 in Gwynedd between Sunday and Tuesday for information. Downing Street says more measures could be introduced to curb net migration. It comes as new figures showed that legal migration hit the UK new record of 745,000 in the year to December. Most estimates suggest immigration is now slowing, while the number of people leaving the UK is going up. Energy bills are expected to rise after the energy regulator announced a 5% increase to the price cap. From January, the average household will pay around £94 more over the course of a year. Ofgem says the increase is mostly driven by market instability and global events. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car on digital radio and your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now, it's back to Richard.
Theo, thank you very much indeed. Welcome to Farage at 7 here on GB News with me, Richard Tice. Now, I just want to test your memory. Do you remember that slogan back in 2019? Take back control was the slogan we were promised. In fact, that was the slogan back in the referendum. Take back control of our laws, money and borders. That's the crucial one. Do you remember reading the Conservative Party manifestos, not just in December 19, but also in 3 other elections, 2010, 2015, and then 2017, that all promised consecutively that they were going to reduce immigration numbers into the United Kingdom? You might even remember David Cameron. He said he wanted to bring them down to the tens of thousands. Tens of thousands. Just think about that. Well, something seems to have happened. And the numbers released this morning confirm that actually it's done exactly the opposite. It has gone into an exponential uphill, almost a straight line uphill. Just look at this graph that I've got here, which actually takes you back to, I think, the 1950s. And you can see that for a number of decades, actually, we almost had, since 1964, we almost had net emigration. And then we had numbers at around less than 100,000 a year. And then all of a sudden, things changed when Tony Blair came to power in 1997. And the numbers increased to about 250,000. That was all part of the whole freedom of movement in the European Union. And then the Tories came to power in 2010. And we'll just look at that graph again because the numbers gradually increased. They sort of milling around the 250,000 mark and then occasionally up to 300,000 mark. And then suddenly, here we are, 2021, 22, and now 2023. You can see this vertical line going absolutely north at a rate of knots. In fact, so rapidly is it heading north that the government has had to admit via the Office for National Statistics today that last year's number that they confirmed 6 months ago was 606,000 net. Wasn't. No, they got it wrong by 20%. Actually, it was 745,000 net. The gross number, people coming in, was about 1.25, 1.3 million people. That's about the size of Birmingham. Just bear that image in mind. So that was 2022, and we were told at the time that it was an exceptional year. Don't worry about it. Things will start to come down. Well, it turns out it wasn't exceptional. Here we are, the 12 months to June 23, and actually the number is just under 700,000. So it wasn't exceptional. This seems to be the norm. So that promise of David Cameron's of tens of thousands, I mean, we're rapidly heading towards, based on that graph, we're heading closer to 1 million net. Now, within that graph, within those numbers, there's something extraordinary, and that's the number of student visas being granted. And it's really important to concentrate on this, because I've got two graphs here that show that actually the student visas, the first one here that you can see, shows this is the growth in student visa numbers. In the last 4 years, it's almost tripled, from around 200,000 to 500,000. So that's sort of 2.5 times just on students. But that's not the end of the story. No, we've got more to come. Because what the next graph shows is the growth in dependents who've also come to the United Kingdom alongside their students. Now, when I went to university, I didn't take my girlfriend to uni up in Manchester. You know, I was okay, I could cope on my own, but no, this has all changed. Yep, so the number of dependents has increased by 6 or 7-fold to about 150,000. So you add 500,000 to 650,000 student visas and student visa dependents, okay, that's 650,000. But here's what I can reveal that I don't think anybody else is focused on. In the overall ONS numbers, they have totaled 410,000 student visas. So there's a gap between 410 and 650,000. That's almost another 250,000 gross and net. So where have those 250,000 gone? Some might say, well, that'll come up in this year's numbers. Well, if that's the case, then it proves my point that these numbers are not exceptional, they're baked in. It might well prove, if the student numbers continue to grow, which the universities want them to and some in the government want them to, that actually we're going to see higher net immigration in this year and in the year to June 2024. So the takeaway from this, folks, is that this is not exceptional, this is baked in. And that therefore leads me to ask the question, the audience question this evening. Is this record immigration, is it the ultimate Brexit betrayal? Is this record immigration the ultimate Brexit betrayal? Email me, farage@gbnews.com, or tweet #Farage on GB News. Well, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by demographer and author Paul Marland on my left, and on my right, Christian Niemitz, who is the head of political economy at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you for being with us. So, I'm going to come to you, Paul. You studied demography. You understand this sort of picture. This level of growth, 1.2 million people arriving in the United Kingdom. This has a significant effect. I mean, that's about 1.5% of the existing population. Have you seen this elsewhere? And is this basically out of control and baked in?
Well,
We haven't seen it historically, and we're often told we're a nation of immigrants. This is a complete myth. This is, in 1 year, massively more people coming into the country than came in the whole period from the Anglo-Saxons to the Second World War.
Just say that again.
From the Anglo-Saxons to the Second World War.
That's a long time ago.
Nothing like 1.2 million people came into the country. If you take the British Isles as a whole, of course, at much of that period we were a single political entity, the United Kingdom of Britain and Ireland. We had an inflow of Normans, quite a small number of people, very hard to know exactly how many. We had some Huguenots, we had a Jewish immigration of a few 100,000 over a 20-year period before the First World War, and dribs and drabs, but nothing like this. And
So you're talking about more in 1 year than about 1,000 years?
1,500
1,500 years. Sorry, the maths isn't quite working.
And these years have gone on and... I mean, that was true every year of the last 20 years, that's been true.
But that's 1 year. But we had 2022, we've now got 23, and what I think is we're going to see the same in 24. How does a country cope demographically with these numbers and the impact on our communities, indeed our culture?
Well, there are precedents. There are countries of immigration like the United States, which had massive immigration at the end of the 19th, early 20th century. Countries built on the ideology of immigration, and countries with a huge amount of space. Mass immigration into traditional countries with long-established indigenous populations, as in Europe, undoubtedly is giving rise to an increased vote for the far right. We've seen that in the Netherlands, we've seen it in Sweden, we've seen it in Italy, we see it on our street.
Well, hang on.
Yes.
I think many would say that's not the far right, that's just people concerned about what's going on with immigration numbers across the whole of Europe.
Well, I think the term far right it has a taboo about it, which doesn't particularly concern me. I mean to the right of traditional conservative parties, which have simply failed to cope or to respond to popular demand.
Absolutely. Well, we'll come back to that in a second. Christian, is this, the impact on housing, which I'm going to talk about later, but the impact on other public services with this level of net immigration on health and on transport, on infrastructure, I mean, this is seismic. And actually, do you agree that people's quality of life is shifting in a downwards direction as a result of this?
I do, but it doesn't have to be that way, even with the current numbers. Because even though the absolute migration numbers are unprecedented, there have been periods in the past when population growth rates were relatively similar. So the post-war baby boom, or, of course, most of the Victorian age. And the reason why nowadays the public sector can't cope, the health system can't cope, the housing market can't cope, is that these sectors are either nationalised or the state controls supply. And that is the issue, that we can't get any infrastructure built because we have an endless planning process around it. The NIMBY lobby is blocking new house building. If we could sort that out, then at least in those terms, high migration numbers would not have to be a problem.
Well, we're going to talk about housing later, but we've got our new Home Secretary just in the job. We've got a government that's promising to bring down the numbers, and yet the Home Secretary's statement today says there are a number of important and positive changes driving the figures. The biggest changes are students and healthcare workers, testament to a world-leading university sector. Well, I've got a What the Farage moment later on, which will truly shock you, about one of these universities. So the Home Secretary seems pretty relaxed about this, and yet we've got a government that's not investing in the public services in order to be able to cope with these sizable numbers, and which seem to be a complete breach of what they promised the people.
But that is part of it. They are trying to... Part of the reason why the numbers have been so high in recent years is that the government has made a conscious decision to recruit more people in the healthcare sector. That's, I think, more than 100,000 on its own, specific visas just for the healthcare sector. And since there aren't enough medical graduates domestically, that is the way they have done it. Now, this may not be a one-off, but it is nonetheless something that they won't keep doing this forever, but that is the result of a political choice, and this has more to do with the healthcare system than with the immigration system.
It is a political choice, but we had the autumn statement yesterday. The Office for Budget Responsibility released its 170-page report that I've read, where it confirms that actually people's net disposable living standards, net disposable income, is at a record low since records began some 50 years ago, because there's no growth and you've got these sort of levels of immigration, and therefore actually everybody's poorer as a result, both financially and from a quality of life point of view?
Well, that's got a lot more to do with bad economic policy choices. So immigration on its own, as long as you make sure that people play by the rules and that you don't get immigration into the benefit system but into the labour market, it can be neutral in terms of living standards or even positive, as long as you make sure
But isn't the proof that actually it's not? We've got zero growth, we've got over 1 million people coming here, supposedly we've got a labour shortage, but we've got over 5 million people on out-of-work benefits. It seems to me that the choices they've made have failed.
Well, I mean, you can't get a work visa right now. You can't get a visa under the current system normally if you go through the work route unless you have a job offer and there is a minimum salary that you have to earn. So it's not that you can come in and...
No, the minimum salaries, I mean, in some cases, is down to 20 grand, £20,000. So it's like 2/3 of the average wage. That's hardly adding value, is it? In terms of
the
high-skilled, highly qualified.
Yeah, that is an exceptional, a special rate. The standard threshold is 26,000 and something.
Still 20% below the average salary. Christian, I'm just going to come back to you, Paul. This is an experiment which feels to me that the numbers are showing is actually failing because the threshold, the salary threshold, the skills level, the added value isn't there, and therefore actually we've got zero growth and net disposable income for people is down.
I think there's another point which we need to consider as well as the purely economic, which is the demographic, which is that when I started in the workforce, and perhaps when you did, there was a big flow of 20-somethings who were born in the UK, bigger than the 60-somethings leaving the workforce. If we have a labour shortage, now it's true there are people who aren't working who perhaps could, but that's always been true. Labour rate participation in the country is fairly high already. We could get that up. But the fundamental problem, I think, is that the 20-somethings coming into the labour force are almost being outweighed by the 60-somethings leaving it. We have this hunger for labour, partly because we've created industries like the universities, which now want to suck in...
That's fine, but we've got 5 million of our own people on out-of-work benefits. So the labour force is potentially there as long as we can make work pay. Time is against us. Gentlemen, thank you so much indeed, Paul Morland and Christian Niemitz, for that fascinating discussion. We'll be coming back to that. And, of course, my question, I want your thoughts on that after the break. We'll be talking about the housing crisis impact on this coming up straight after the break. Don't go anywhere.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only three people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, my friends. Well, my audience question this evening on the back of these record immigration numbers this morning released is this record immigration numbers, the ultimate Brexit betrayal? Stephen says, absolutely a catastrophic betrayal of Brexit. Stephen's pretty clear on that. John says, of course, we've been betrayed by the lying and useless politicians. They won't be happy with that. Chris says, this is interesting. These immigration figures are to rub the nose of the Brexiteers in it. I suspect there's some truth to that, Chris, actually, from some of the Ramonas in Parliament. Jenny says, it's an absolute betrayal, she says. The Tories have bunged their ears up because no matter how loud we shout, they will not listen. Well, I described the profile of immigration, the promises for the Conservative Party in many manifestos and in the last election, and it's all been ignored completely the other way. And there are so many implications of high levels of immigration. We heard it earlier from Paul Morland and Christian Niemitz. But I deliberately didn't talk about the impact on housing, because my next guest in the studio is a housing expert, one Russell Quirk, property and housing expert. Russell, very good evening. Thanks for being on the show. Now, these numbers, firstly, were you shocked by these?
What, the net migration numbers?
Net migration, and indeed the gross number.
Well, yes, I was, but also the fact that they had to be revised.
Yes.
Of course, that there was a little bit of stealth gone on in previous years by the looks of it.
Like by 20%,
yes.
Not just a few percent.
Yes.
They seem to change the methodology.
Yes, it's huge, and obviously, not just from a housing perspective, but from the point of view of all resources, completely and utterly unsustainable.
And so let's just look at housing, because clearly, we know that basically, the cost of renting has gone through the roof.
Yeah.
You've got the usual sort of economic factors of demand and supply. And we've got a graph here, which you'll remember earlier in the show, had the graph of the immigration numbers, which is the blue line on this graphic. Now, Russell, the red line, and this is since 1964 to now, the red line on this graph is the housing completions during that same period. So you've got net immigration soaring in recent years, and you've got a collapse in housing numbers. So
yes. So we've got both graphs going the wrong way. So we have net migration increasing substantially, as you can see from the graph. From the point of view of housing supply, so the provision of new homes, whether that's sale or rental, because it all comes out of the same pot effectively, what we've actually seen in real terms is a halving, so 50% reduction in housing provision since the 1960s. So in the days of the Macmillan government and during the 60s and 70s, typically about 300,000 new homes were built and produced in Britain every year. Now, over the last 13 years, so since the start of this particular government, it's only 168,000 homes. And I have to say to you, Labour, not that much better. So before the Labour supporters start crowing and saying, oh, well, we'll be much, much better when we get in next year. No, they won't, because their average is only 180,000 homes per year versus their own self-imposed targets of 300,000 a year.
Sir Keir Starmer has promised
Build.
He's promised he'll build 1.5 million in 5 years, so that's 300,000 a year.
Yeah.
When did we last build 300,000 homes in this country?
In the 1960s.
In the 1960s?
Yeah, and if Keir Starmer manages to do that, I will eat my shoes, Richard.
Remember that, folks? You heard it here first. Russell has promised to eat his shoes if in the next 5 years we build 300,000 homes. I agree with you. I think that's very unlikely. I promised last week to eat my hat on something else. I'm not going to promise to eat anything else. But here's the thing. We're not going to build 300,000 a year. These numbers are going through the roof. So what does that mean? Does it basically mean rents are going up and up?
Well, everything's going up. So if you look at house prices, I mean, house prices are up, despite the recent dip, by about 20% since just before the pandemic. So 20% just in the last 3 or 4 years. You know, we've seen an incredible increase in house values, both for sale and for rental, simply because of the shortage of supply versus demand. There have been multiple studies that say that immigration alone over the last 20 years or so has added about 20% to house prices, just immigration alone.
So that graphic that showed the housing completions against the immigration, you can see that actually pre-1990 you had far more houses being built, and therefore you didn't have these huge price growth, and therefore the impact for young people actually they suffer the most. It's ever harder to get on the housing ladder, and I guess essentially people's become more cramped. More people have to live in the same homes, the same dwellings,
particularly now,
sort of to bunk up in order to be able to live.
Yeah, so there was some mitigation in recent years with interest rates being ridiculously low, but now they've gone back to what I would call normal levels. And by the way, 5% interest rates are not high by historic standards. Now interest rates have gone back to normal levels. Of course, there is no more that mitigation. So for first-time buyers, it's getting harder and harder. But to the point in terms of how those houses get built. And it's not just Keir Starmer and, you know, previous prime ministers of all political flavours that have just literally licked a finger and stuck it in the air and said, we are going to build this many houses. Well, it's nothing but wishful thinking and rhetoric. The reason they won't, frankly, is because the contrast now between where we are today on house building in the 1960s is two things. First of all, we used to build lots and lots of council houses back in the 1960s and 70s. So about half those 300,000 homes were social homes that were needed. But the other reason is that we are now, whether we like it or not, and I say this as a huge capitalist, by the way, before anybody starts telling me off for being a socialist, we are in the hands, in terms of housing supply, of just 10 PLC house builders. They now control almost all new builds being built.
Some would say, well, we need to get a grip and we need to ease the planning regulations, and it'd be great for the economy if we built 300,000 or 400,000 a year.
It's not
fantastic.
It's a misnomer to say it's the planning process. So the difference between those planning permissions granted over 10 years and the houses actually built is huge. There's a huge gap, a bit like your graph there, insofar as planning consents versus what's built.
So you're blaming the developers?
I'm blaming the house builders, and I don't blame them, because if they are working to the behest of their shareholders, I don't blame them. That's their job, but their job...
So might a Labour government say, well, actually, we're going to borrow more money...
How are they going to do it?
Or print more money, and they might say, we're just going to build 150,000 council homes on government-owned land.
And I wish they would, but the problem is governments and local authorities don't know how to build houses. They're not developers. It's wishful thinking. It's easy to say. And frankly, look, if you don't do something about the stranglehold of those top 10 house builders who have no social...
They've got no
social responsibility.
No, absolutely. Well, that's a good point. We will come back to that. Russell Quirk, thank you so much indeed for sharing your expertise and knowledge on that. He knows a thing or two. Talking of knowing a thing or two, after the break, we'll be going back to the Gold Coast. Extraordinary events on, of course, I'm a Celebrity last night. Ben Leo is waiting to speak to us. Don't go anywhere. It's fascinating because Nigel continues to reveal all. Stay with us.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life: your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Welcome back to Farage on GB News. Well, of course, it's all happening down under in Australia. I'm sure that you've been watching each night, every night. But if you haven't caught up, or you still sort of thinking about watching, then I've got a few special highlights of last night and what Nigel was getting up to. Just watch this.
The bags arrived with 4 game birds, silky birds, and most of the camp are looking at it going, ah! And I'm thinking, terrific.
Nigel, how many times have you done this?
Thousands.
You do this every weekend?
In season, yeah.
Oh, God.
Luckily, we have Nigel Farage. You don't often get to say that.
I mean, this is a proper birdie meal tonight.
Proper birds.
Yeah.
Proper bird. So, Nick, do you like a good game bird?
I do like a game bird.
No, we're going to get everything tidied away properly tonight after last night's
Oh, yeah.
and it was I'll take it down.
Nigel. We will not have another tonight like the rubbish. No. Oh, no. Failed. Failed now. No, can't have that again. Can't have them again. And we're like...
Nella gave me these to bring back. They're all dirty. Jesus Christ.
Are they? Oh, no. Oh, no.
Well, there we are. I mean, we've all been slightly terrified here about Nigel's obsession with cleaning. So don't worry, Nigel. Here we are. I've got some cleaner. Yep, we're going to keep the desk clean for you. No worries at all. All will be OK, because Nigel is very concerned about things being clean. I think we've got better things to do at the moment. But anyway, it's going to be absolutely fantastic again tonight. And we're just going to see what Ben's got in store for us. Ben, are you there on the Gold Coast once again? Look at that sea behind you. Looks marvellous. How's the surfing going, Ben?
Well, look, you were taking the mickey out of me yesterday for my attempts at surfing, but that was my first time ever, literally. I was rather ungraceful, admittedly, and not as elegant as these guys out here, but what a lifestyle. 5 in the morning here, and they're out on their surfboards and paddleboards. But look, enough of that. Nigel had his second rumble in the jungle last night over his stance on immigration. He'd already been lambasted by Fred Siriex, the French Remainer, a couple of days back. Last night, Nella Rose got involved and had a crack at him. This is what happened.
So basically...
But this is what I was saying to you.
Apparently you're anti-immigrants.
Who told you that?
Oh, the internet.
Oh, well, there we are, then. It must be true. It must be true.
It must be.
It must be true.
OK, but then why don't black people like you?
You'd be amazed they do.
Well,
You'd be amazed.
Nigel!
If you came with me... If you came with me... If you came with me through South London, you'd be astonished.
Oh, wow. What were you doing in South London, Nigel?
Well, I'm there every day. But to chuck around accusations the way that they've been chucked around is grossly unfair. Anti-immigrant, right? No. All I've said is we cannot go on with the numbers coming to Britain that are coming. Do you know why?
I'm one of the numbers!
Oh, right. So that's it then. So should it be 5 million a year, 10 million?
Question,
No,
right?
you don't seem to understand.
Hang on.
Those immigrants that are coming in.
And hang on.
Had you have been in power a bit later?
What's so wrong about immigrants?
And isn't it ironic, Richard, just hours after that was filmed, like a gift from the gods of common sense, the UK's net migration figures get released, proving Nigel's point in its entirety. A city the size of Birmingham coming to the UK in just over 2 years. And I've been wondering what Nigel's reaction would have been to those migration figures. And all Nella Rosa's fans having a crack at him for that row we just saw there. I think he'd say, well, you all laughed at me. Well, you're not laughing now, are you? Elsewhere tonight, two new campmates. Frankie Dettori, three-time champion flat jockey, is joining the camp alongside former pro boxer Tony Bellew, who admittedly Nigel does have some previous with, so Nigel may get a hat-trick of confrontations. I'll just read you what Tony said of Nigel last year. In response to a video on migration that Nigel put out on Twitter, Bellew said, Nigel, learn to see people for who they are and not what they look like. It's because of people like you that racism still exists. Absolute maniac, you are. Just over 2 and a bit weeks of this left to go.
Feels to me, thank you very much indeed, Ben. It feels to me as though this is just warming up. I mean, with Fred and, with Tony coming in, you do not want to miss any of this. I think we're just seeing literally a sort of almost the tease, the warm-up to this. And you're quite right, Ben. Thank you for that, those thoughts there. You're quite right about Nigel's views on these immigration numbers. Completely out of control, complete betrayal of what we were promised with Brexit and when people voted this Conservative government in. And within some of these numbers, I was also pretty astonished to learn. And what do you think of this, folks? So you may or may not know of the University of Hertfordshire, which is based around Hatfield, which extraordinarily, I mean, maybe it is a global epicentre of education. Some 32,000 students from over 140 countries. Here's my What the Farage moment. That you can do a course, an MSc in management, cost you about 15 grand a year. There's no need to speak English, and it's 100% coursework. See, probably you barely need to even turn up. So it's probably not a surprise that somewhere like the University of Hertfordshire is the place where where most, for example, Nigerian students and their dependents, where they've chosen to go. You don't need to speak English. I don't know, maybe artificial intelligence translates all of your coursework into English for it to be marked. Who knows? But what do you think about that? I think something's going wrong here. I think these student numbers are completely out of control. I think we're going to see even more next year. I think essentially many people around the world have worked out that this is the back door into the front door to live in the United Kingdom. Now, of course, we did ask the University of Hertfordshire for a comment, and their spokesman said, we have a stringent entry criteria, checks for all of our students, irrespective of where they came from, which is all clearly listed on their website. We're extremely proud that our university continues to attract students from all over the world and celebrate their valuable contribution. International students enhance the university experience for our community and contribute enormously to the life of the economy, the region and the UK. Well, that may well be the case, but I'm not so sure, because what I think is going on here is that you can now get a graduate visa for 2 years after you've got your degree. That then qualifies you for a 5-year skilled worker visa, including your dependents, and then you can stay here forever. So you can see how the back door, all of a sudden, is the front door. I think we're going to see these student numbers continue to rise. The government's pledged otherwise. Let's wait and see. Well, something a little bit different now. After the break, is Labour struggling to keep its Muslim vote? We're going to be talking about that. There is a serious row brewing. Don't go anywhere. It's Farage on GB News.
Patrick Christie's tonight, 9 till 11 p.m. Is Britain a hotel for immigrants? I delve into the scandal that is our net migration figures alongside Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, who wants Rishi out. Plus, after I'm a Celeb diva Nella Rose clashed with Nigel Farage, are young people ignorant on the issue of immigration? The Israeli government spokesperson responds after that bombshell Kay Burley interview. We'll bring you the latest big moments from Nigel's jungle journey and the most exciting paper review anywhere on the telly. Patrick Christie tonight, 9 till 11 p.m. Be there.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage. And last week I was touching on some of the problems that the Labour Party might have in terms of the pressure from Muslim communities where constituencies have got a big Muslim vote and how that might transpire. Might you see the possibility, I asked, of independent Muslim candidates challenging traditionally safe Labour MPs in safe Labour seats? Well, I think I was on the money. Just watch this clip from Andrew Marr in late October. Just watch this.
Muslim community is more united in its anger about Gaza and Palestine now than it has ever been. And that according to this census, support for the Labour Party is dropping from around 70% to below 5%. That is a catastrophic fall in support for Labour. The Muslim community is turning its back on the Labour Party at the moment. Labour, for an awful lot of Muslims, was the soft way into politics, as was described to me, but it is no longer. And people are looking again very, very aggressively at what Keir Starmer has been saying, and they're being encouraged to do so by imams and community leaders all across the country. And the danger for the Labour Party is that the other side of this argument is really well organised and moving quite fast. So I've been told there are spreadsheets passing around of every single Labour MP with a reasonable Muslim vote in his constituency, a reasonable Muslim majority, looking at exactly what he or she has said on this subject and how what they're saying is changing week by week by week.
I mean, that's extraordinary. That was Andrew Marr in late October. Well, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Scarlett Maguire, former Labour advisor under Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, very experienced in sort of Labour politics, Labour circles. Scarlett, that is fascinating. But that's some 3 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago from Andrew Marr. He's a very experienced commentator, and he's had that intelligence. I would argue that the Labour Party's had more challenges since in terms of some of what I think is the harassment and bullying of MPs, depending on what they've said. Are you surprised by this? I mean, the idea of spreadsheets and things?
No. I mean, I knew about it. But I think that was October. So genuinely, what happened was that Keir did a car crash LBC interview in which he said, yes, it's OK if Israel cuts off aid, food and fuel to the Palestinians in Gaza. It was a terrible mistake, right? And he should have recanted on it within the hour, and he took a week. And during that week, people were really, really angry. But I mean, I know one of the leading councillors who resigned. I mean, she was incredibly sad. She, can I say, believes in a two-state solution, absolutely condemns Hamas for what happened, but actually also feels that Labour should be talking about what's happened to the Palestinians and the deaths of the Palestinians. And certainly, I mean, you know, you're right that many Labour MPs have had literally thousands and thousands of emails. I mean, I think Stephen Timms had 12,000 last week. Karen Buck had 10.
10,000.
10,000. Yes. I mean, I think almost everybody's had over 1,000. But actually, it's a moving situation.
Yes, for sure. But the concept of those huge numbers of emails, imams being involved, and it seems to me in the last couple of weeks you've got much greater harassment. It feels to me that actually, far from being overcome, it's getting worse.
No, I talking to MPs it's not getting worse. I mean, there might be trouble spots. I mean, for instance, you know, in Tower Hamlets, there's Lutfa Imran, who's
very well organised. He's got
very well
organised,
and certainly, you know, he and his people are desperately trying to bully Roshanara Ali. But actually, for most MPs, even though there was a campaign, you know, no ceasefire, no vote, and to say, you know, we're not going to vote for you unless you vote for
But Starmer's held off, hasn't he? He's still not called for a ceasefire. He's called for a humanitarian pause.
Yes, but Richard, what is going to happen tomorrow morning? Is this a humanitarian pause or is it a ceasefire, right? I mean, you know, the rockets are going to stop. We hope the killing is going to stop. Some of the hostages are going to be let go. They say it's going to be 4 days. During those 4 days, there'll be massive negotiations. I mean, that's exactly what we all want to happen.
Yeah, look, we all want peace, that's for sure. And in those 4 days, hopefully, the hostages will be released, and I think there's essentially it's a sort of prisoner swap, isn't it? There seem to be about 150 Palestinian prisoners coming from Israel. But in a sense, there was a ceasefire before October the 7th. I mean, it's... and the thing is, though, you can't have a one-sided ceasefire. That's called surrender.
No, I'm not... I mean, there was no question that through all of this, as Palestinians were being killed in their hundreds and thousands, right, that Hamas was sending rockets into Israel. I mean, I don't think the vast majority of these Labour Muslims who are very, very angry, I mean, really vast majority, absolutely condemn Hamas and just what they want to make sure is the Palestinian voices are being heard, right?
So this is essentially, it's an ongoing anxiety for the Labour Party and Labour MPs between now and the next election that if they get this wrong, they're going to be faced with potentially dozens of well-resourced, well-organised, independent candidates. It's a sort of... It's a threat. It's the threat of something hanging over them, isn't it?
No, I mean, I think it's going to happen. If it happens at all, it'll happen in very, very few places. Right? Is that I think at the moment, you know, everybody's looking at the ceasefire or the pause, whatever we call it, right? It's happening now. That's what's important. There's no question that this is exactly what Keir Starmer and Labour wanted, that they have been talking about Gaza, that actually we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I mean, I think the other thing you have to remember is that the Labour movement is not just Muslims, right? The Labour movement as a whole, including MPs, feel very, very strongly about Palestine, Gaza, Israel, and there's a whole gamut, right, of different opinions.
Sure,
I mean, there are Labour friends of Israel and Labour friends of Palestine.
Within the majority of the Labour Party, do they feel that for a permanent solution, which obviously everybody wants, that actually Hamas cannot govern Gaza, or are they a bit soft and gooey on that critical point?
I don't think. I think that the permanent solution is a two-state solution, but I mean, there is a serious.
But they can't be governed by Hamas.
But also, there's a problem in the West Bank about governance. I mean, there's a terrible problem in the West Bank about what the settlers they are killing Palestinians, right? But there's also a real problem about governance, and actually. Sometime ages ago, right at the beginning, I think it was Simon Tisdale of The Guardian talked about, this is all about old men. This is about Netanyahu, this is about Hamas, and this is about Abbas. And actually, what we need is a whole new governance of...
New governance and leadership of both the West Bank, but also critically, and Gaza. Absolutely. Well, there's a lot of water to pass under that bridge. Coming back to UK politics, immigration numbers released this morning. Labour's position, I mean, they're quite relaxed about mass immigration. They're not going to reduce the numbers at all, are they?
Well, I mean, the point is, this is legal immigration, right? So what you have to...
It's essentially Tory policy.
What you have to say is why are we having all these people? I mean, when people go, oh, well, you know, we need to put the threshold up so that you have to earn more money. Well, where are we going to get everybody else? We need to. I mean, I was reading.
We've got 5 million people on out-of-work benefits who I want to lift the tax threshold from 12.5 grand to 20 grand and get 2 or 3 million of those back into work.
Well,
must be the right thing.
That is not why they don't work, Richard. I mean, the problem
They're not all sick.
Well, 2.5 million are.
2.5. Well, yeah, there's 5, so that's another 2.5 million I wanted to work.
But also there's always unemployment. I mean, there's always people going in and out of work, right? That you're always going to have.
But it's 1.5 million more than pre-COVID.
It's 1.5 million more pre-COVID because I mean there's desperate mental health problems, right? And there's because the NHS has massive waiting lists, so. You have a knee problem, and the knee problem ends up you have secondary type 2 diabetes because you're not mobile, you're eating too much, you're depressed.
So you don't think that number can come down, and therefore you think the Labour Party is quite happy with these sort of numbers?
I think they'll always no.
I mean, these are record numbers.
No,
they are triple pre-19.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought the whole point about people like you, I mean, what it showed...
The whole point of Brexit was to take back control of our borders.
Yeah.
And they've done the opposite.
To stop EU citizens from coming. And but what do we do about the fact that there aren't enough carers, right? What do we do about there aren't enough fruit pickers? I mean, that is a real problem. And I have to say the farmers do not want English people pricking their fruit. They're useless.
Sure. Just finally, before we go to the weather, date of the next election, May, summer or October?
You see, I think it's going to be October because I think the polls won't change, which is what they want. That's what yesterday was about, was an election bribe, but I'm not sure it's going to work.
Wow,
I think it might even be January. Honestly, you can't
have a Christmas.
They'll be like
you can't have a Christmas election, Scarlett.
They'll be like John Major in '97. They'll go as long as possible.
Scarlett, thank you very much indeed for her thoughts there. Don't go anywhere, folks. Coming up, State of the Nation with Jacob Rees-Mogg. But first, it's the weather.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. The wind's picking up out there, a blustery and cold day tomorrow, but most places will see some sunny spells. The reason for the change, a cold front is pushing south. Ahead of it, still quite mild. Behind it, very windy and much colder air arriving. So strong the winds, we actually have a Met Office yellow warning in place across Shetland, but across Orkney and the northeast of the mainland, very blustery with wintry showers coming in here. A little bit of snow is possible. A little bit of rain will clear away from England and Wales. Most places will be dry. Turning pretty chilly, but temperatures holding up in the southwest. But actually here during tomorrow, temperatures will tend to fall away. We'll start with cloud and still some patchy rain over maybe North Wales. Some showers just hitting parts of Aberdeenshire and then the east coast of England, especially Norfolk seeing the odd shower. But for most places, it's dry. For many, it'll be fine and sunny, but it ain't going to be warm with temperatures in single figures. A chilly day and feeling particularly cold in the east with this brisk wind. That wind will only slowly ease during Saturday, but it should ease away, as will any showers just hitting the eastern side of England. And for most, Saturday is also set fair. Yes, there'll be a frosty start, but then plenty of autumn sunshine, lifting the temperatures to between 4 and 8 Celsius. A chilly one ahead. Goodbye.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here